Welcome to a new video of Flop Files. Today, we're diving deep into a dramatic and honestly kind of suspenseful investigation. We're looking at the unbelievable rise, the absolute dominance, and then the shocking, completely unprecedented collapse of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I mean, this isn't just a story about movies, right? It's the story of a modern-day empire, an empire that felt literally untouchable until the cracks in its foundation just got way too massive to hide. So how does the biggest pop culture phenomenon in history suddenly lose its grip on the world? Let's get into it. Okay, so to understand the fall, we first have to look at the absolute peak. The year is 2019. Marvel drops Avengers Endgame. And guys, it doesn't just break records, it absolutely shatters them, raking in a massive $2.8 billion at the global box office. I mean, think about that number. At this exact moment, Marvel Studios had the ultimate Midas touch. Literally everything they touched turned to gold. Every character they introduced instantly became a household name. They were the undisputed kings of Hollywood. But you know what they say, the higher you climb, the harder you fall. And there's no way anyone could have predicted how fast this empire was about to plunge. Because just 4 years later, we witness a devastating crash. The Marvels hits theaters in 2023, and it barely scrapes together $200 million globally. That makes it the lowest grossing film in MCU history. We're talking about a multi-billion-dollar drop-off here. It exposed a cracked foundation and a massive fan base that, well, just suddenly stopped showing up. So the ultimate question we have to answer today is what exactly went wrong behind the curtain?
Part 1, the peak of the empire. Okay, let's dive into this.
To really solve this mystery, we gotta look back at the golden age. Back when midnight premieres were basically mandatory cultural events, you know? Marvel absolutely dominated the industry by building this incredible, interconnected universe, and it rested firmly on the shoulders of these deeply flawed but absolutely beloved foundational heroes: Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, the Hulk, and Spider-Man. They took these characters, grounded them in genuine human emotion, and built a massive foundation of trust with the audience. But trust alone doesn't print billions of dollars, right? Which brings us to part 2. Why Marvel became dominant.
See, under Kevin Feige, they didn't just make standard blockbuster movies. They crafted a highly complex 22-film puzzle. If you compare typical movies, which, just offer simple, isolated entertainment, to the MCU formula, the difference is literally night and day. Marvel provided an immersive experience. Fans were actually rewarded. If you stayed in your seat for those end credit clues, or if you tracked a character's growth across a whole decade of storytelling, you felt like an insider. It turned casual viewers into obsessive theorists. It was a real community. But what happens when that community gets pushed way past its limit? Now, after Endgame gave us that absolutely perfect emotional conclusion to the Infinity Saga, the studio was basically looking at an open field of infinite opportunities. They had this meticulous blueprint. But their very next strategic move would unexpectedly become the ultimate villain of their own story. Part 3, the post-Endgame decline. All right, so we're entering the dark era of the MCU now. And the true villain here, it wasn't Thanos, it wasn't Dr. Doom or Ultron, it was mandatory homework. Seriously. In 2021, the Disney Plus expansion kicks off. Marvel just starts launching this endless barrage of television spin-offs. Suddenly, to understand a 2-hour movie, you had to watch like 6 hours of TV first. The magic was bleeding dry. And the data proves it. Viewer retention data actually revealed that some Marvel series lost up to 40% of their audience between the premiere and the finale. 40%. The MCU had basically become a chore. And to make matters worse, the quality on the big screen was taking a huge hit at the exact same time. When you put the Infinity Saga right up against the new Multiverse Saga, the cracks are just obvious. The Infinity Saga relied on a really slow build and massive emotional stakes. But the Multiverse Saga, it gave us confusing timelines, cheap CGI, and major character bloat. Just look at 2025's Captain America 4. It sits at a really rough 48% on Rotten Tomatoes, and it was heavily criticized for weak special effects in a final battle that literally devolved into, quote, verbal therapy. The on-screen product was failing, but the real suspense? The plot was losing the audience because a massive real-world crisis was forcing a complete internal panic behind closed doors. Part 4. Behind-the-scenes chaos. So behind the scenes, the Marvel machine was completely breaking down, and it all centered around one totally unprecedented gamble: the Kang crisis. Now, originally, the next phase wasn't even going to center around the villain Kang, but executives saw Jonathan Majors' incredible performances in the dailies for Quantumania and Loki, and they just pivoted everything. They hung their entire multi-billion-dollar future on one actor. But then, real-world assault charges against Majors broke the news. Marvel officially fired him, and suddenly the studio was thrown into total chaos, scrambling to rewrite their entire master plan completely on the fly. And the panic? It definitely didn't stop there. At the exact same time, the television side reached its own breaking point. Marvel had been doing this crazy thing where they were shooting entire $150 million TV seasons on the fly, without pilots. Kevin Feige watched some early footage of Daredevil Born Again, immediately halted the production, and just fired the writers. Reports actually revealed that Feige was spread so incredibly thin, staffers were literally chasing him down hallways just to get answers. The strategy of shooting TV shows like they were movies was fundamentally broken. So, with the entire franchise hanging by a thread, Disney and Marvel's top brass realized they had to step in. Executive intervention was literally the only way to save the brand before the empire collapsed completely. They needed to stop the bleeding, and they needed to do it publicly. Which leads to Disney CEO Bob Iger grabbing the microphone and admitting the hard truth. He said, and I quote, "We're slowly going to decrease volume and reduce our film output, prioritize quality over quantity." Iger announced they were slashing their TV output to just 2 shows a year and capping movies at a maximum of 3. They were officially stepping in to kill the audience's homework fatigue. But the ultimate question remained, would this actually be enough to save them?
Part 5. The current MCU comeback. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is
This massive, desperate course correction, it might actually be working. Look at this 2025 resurgence. Thunderbolts drops, and it hits an 88% from critics and a 93% from audiences. Right after that, Fantastic Four First Steps hits an 86% critical score and a 91% audience score. Marvel achieved back-to-back critical hits with a Rotten Tomatoes streak of 85% or higher. To put that into perspective, the last time they pulled that off, you have to go all the way back to 2019. You know, the glory days of Endgame and Spider-Man Far From Home. So they are finally finding their footing again. And if we look at their future slate, oh man, they are bringing out the heavy artillery. We've got a reworked Daredevil, Tom Holland returning for Spider-Man Brand New Day, and 2 massive Avengers films, Doomsday and Secret Wars. They're pivoting back to familiar faces, bringing back proven directors like the Russo brothers, and clearly aiming to reclaim that billion-dollar crown. I mean, on paper, they are doing everything right. But there is still one lingering doubt. Part 6. Did the audience change? Because despite this really promising rebound, the franchise remains, well, slightly bruised. Think about it. The world went through a pandemic, our streaming habits completely evolved, and the way we consume entertainment just utterly transformed, which leaves us with one massive, completely unresolved mystery about pop culture. Did Marvel lose its magic, or did audiences just change?